The sensor alarm woke Lieutenant Sarah Okonkwo from a dreamless sleep. She had worked the night shift at Border Station 12 for 3 years, and the alarms were usually false readings. Space dust, cosmic radiation, sometimes a merchant ship with broken identification codes. She walked to her console and looked at the screen. The coffee cup in her hand slipped from her fingers and shattered on the floor. 12 ships had appeared at the edge of known space. Their identification codes were 50 years old. They belonged to the first expeditionary fleet, the ships that had vanished during a routine jump to the Kepler system half a century ago. Every child on Earth knew the story. Every human who had ever looked up at the stars knew the names of those ships and the 3,000 souls who had disappeared without a trace. Sarah's hands shook as she opened a communication channel to Earth Defense Command. Admiral Chen Weiming was eating breakfast with her daughter when her personal communicator buzzed. With the highest priority alert, she excused herself and stepped into her office. The message from Border Station 12 made her sit down heavily in her chair. The S. Horizon was among the returned ships. Her grandmother, Lieutenant Commander Mei Chen, had served as navigation officer on that vessel. Weiming had grown up looking at photographs of a woman she had never met, listening to stories from her father about the mother, who had vanished into the darkness between stars. She composed herself and contacted the Galactic Concord headquarters immediately. Whatever was happening, it would affect more than just Earth. The Galactic Concord was the alliance of 37 spacefaring species that governed this region of the galaxy. Humanity had joined 50 years ago, shortly after the fleet's disappearance. They were considered a minor species, young, inexperienced, still learning the rules of interstellar civilization. The older species tolerated humans, but rarely took them seriously. Within hours, representatives from every Concord species had gathered in the Great Chamber on Concord Prime. The holographic display showed 12 human vessels holding position at the border. But something was wrong with the images. The ships looked like Earth designs, but they had been changed, modified. Parts of them seemed to shimmer and shift, as if they existed in more than 3 dimensions. High Ambassador Threx of the Dominion stood and pointed at the display with one of his forearms. The Dominion was the most powerful military civilization in the Concord, and Threx rarely missed a chance to remind everyone of this fact. "These vessels must be quarantined immediately," he declared. "We do not know where they have been. We do not know what they carry. They could be contaminated with unknown pathogens or hostile technology." The representative from the Velith Collective, a small creature covered in blue fur, spoke up. "Perhaps we should ask the humans what they want. They are requesting permission to return home. Surely that is not unreasonable." Threx made a sound of disgust. "The humans are children playing with fire. Their ships vanished and have returned carrying technology that our sensors cannot identify. This is a threat to galactic security." Admiral Chen stood. She had been granted observer status at the emergency session. "These are our people, our ships. We have the right to welcome them home. You have the rights we grant you," Threx replied coldly. Nothing more. The council voted. The decision was made. The returned fleet would be escorted to quarantine station Omega-7 for study. Human objections were noted and ignored. Admiral Chen watched the vote with a cold feeling in her stomach. She had expected this result, but it still hurt. 50 years of faithful membership in the Concord, and humanity was still treated like children who could not be trusted with their own people. Her communicator buzzed. A private message, heavily encrypted, from the ESS Horizon. She opened it in her quarters that night, alone except for the stars outside her window. A woman appeared on the screen. She looked young, perhaps 30 years old, with short black hair and calm dark eyes. She wore an Earth Navy uniform, but the insignia was 50 years out of date. "Admiral Chen," the woman said. "My name is Captain Yuki Tanaka. I commanded the Horizon after Commander Reyes died during our journey. I understand you are the granddaughter of Mei Chen. She speaks of you often. She will be happy to see what you have become." Weiming's heart stopped. Her grandmother was alive after 50 years. "I am sending this message because I need you to understand something," Tanaka continued. "We did not choose to disappear. We were taken. And what we found out there," she paused, and for a moment, something like fear crossed her face. We found what waits at the edge of known space. The things that were here before any of us. The ones who built and then abandoned this galaxy. Tanaka leaned closer to the camera. They left warnings. They left tools. And they left because something was coming. Something they could not stop. Only delay. The captain's voice dropped lower. It is waking up, Admiral. The thing they ran from. We have brought back what knowledge we could. Weapons, shields, ways to fight. But we need humanity to be ready. We need the Concord to listen. And I fear they will not. The message ended. Admiral Chen sat in the darkness for a long time, watching the stars and wondering what waited in the spaces between them. The returned fleet was escorted to quarantine station Omega-7 3 days later. Admiral Chen pulled every string she had to be present for the arrival. She stood in the observation deck as the 12 ships docked, and she felt tears running down her face when she saw the Horizon's hull up close. The ship had been transformed. The basic shape was the same, but the metal had been replaced with something that seemed to flow like liquid. When light touched it, strange symbols covered the hull, not human writing, not anything in the Concord's database. The engines glowed with a soft golden light that hurt to look at directly. The crews disembarked under heavy guard. Concord security forces in full armor surrounded them, weapons ready. But the returned humans showed no fear. They walked calmly, peacefully, like people who had seen things that made armed guards seem very small. Admiral Chen spotted her grandmother immediately. Mei Chen looked exactly like her photographs, a woman in her 30s with gray-streaked hair and kind eyes. She had not aged a day in 50 years. Their eyes met across the docking bay. Mei smiled and raised her hand in a small wave. Chen had to be restrained by her aide from running to embrace her. Later, the aide whispered, "There will be time later." Chen nodded, but she did not believe it. The way the Concorde was acting, the way Threx and his allies looked at the returned fleet, there might never be time. Humanity's lost children had come home, and the galaxy was already trying to take them away again. Captain Tanaka was the last to leave her ship. She walked down the ramp slowly, looking around the station with an expression that was hard to read. When she reached the bottom, she stopped in front of the Concorde official who had come to process them. "We request to speak with the full council," Tanaka said. "We carry warnings that concern every species in the galaxy. Lives depend on this information being heard." The official, a tall insectoid creature from the hive worlds, clicked its mandibles. "You will speak when the council permits it. For now, you are to be examined and your vessels studied. This is not negotiable." Tanaka nodded slowly. "We will cooperate. We have nothing to hide. But please pass along my request. What we know cannot wait. Every day we delay, the danger grows." The official made a note on its datapad and moved on without responding. Admiral Chen finally got permission to speak with her grandmother that evening. They sat across from each other in a sterile interview room, watched by cameras and guards. It was not the reunion Chen had dreamed of, but it was something. "You look just like your mother," Mei said, reaching across the table to touch Chen's hand. "She was only a baby when we left. I missed everything. Her first words, her first steps, her wedding, her death. She never stopped looking for you," Chen replied. "None of us did." Mei's eyes glistened. "I know. We could see Earth sometimes, from where we were, like looking through a window into a room you cannot enter. We watched you grow. We watched humanity join the Concorde. We were so proud. Where were you? What happened?" Mei glanced at the cameras. "The jump drive malfunctioned. We were pulled somewhere else, somewhere outside normal space, the home of the species that came before all others in this galaxy." She squeezed Chen's hand. "They were wonderful, whiming, and terrible, and so very sad. They gave us everything they could before they left. Tools, knowledge, warnings." "Warnings about what?" Mei's face grew serious. "Something is coming. Something that has been sleeping since before the first stars formed. The elder species could not stop it. They could only run. And now it is waking up." Chen felt cold. "What is it?" "We call it the silence," Mei whispered, "because that is what it leaves behind. Everywhere it goes, silence. No life, no signals, no hope." She looked into Chen's eyes. "We came back to help you fight it. But I am afraid the Concorde will not let us." The cameras watched. The guards listened. And somewhere in the darkness between galaxies, something vast and old and hungry began to stir. Admiral Chen left the interview room with her grandmother's words echoing in her mind. She had always believed that humanity's greatest challenges were political, earning respect in the Concord, building alliances, proving. The examination rooms of Quarantine Station Omega-7 were cold and white and sterile. Dr. Veth, Chief Medical Officer for the Concord's Science Division, had examined thousands of beings from dozens of species. Nothing had prepared him for the humans from the returned fleet. They were human. Every test confirmed this. Their DNA matched Earth records perfectly. Their blood, their bones, their organs all completely human. But something fundamental had changed. Something his instruments could detect but not explain. Your cellular regeneration rate is impossible, he told Captain Tanaka during her examination. Your cells repair damage almost instantly. Your neural pathways show activity patterns we have never seen in any species. You should be 90 years old, but your body reads as 32. Tanaka sat calmly on the examination table, watching him with those steady dark eyes. Time moves differently where we were. 50 years passed for you. For us, it was closer to 18 months. That is not how physics works. The physics, you know. She agreed. There are other rules, deeper ones. The elder species understood them. They taught us what they could. Dr. Veth made more notes. His hands were trembling slightly. He had spent his career believing that science could explain everything. Now he was looking at proof that the universe held secrets far beyond his understanding. In the engineering bays, teams of Concord scientists were attempting to study the return ships. They had brought the most advanced scanning equipment in the galaxy. None of it worked. Engineer First Class Thrin, a Dominion specialist with 4 arms and decades of experience, stood before the hull of the ESS Horizon with growing frustration. His scanners showed nothing. Not empty readings, nothing. As if the ship did not exist in any way his instruments could measure. Run the deep scan again. He ordered his team. Sir, we have run it 17 times. The results are always the same. Thrin reached out and touched the hull. It felt solid under his fingers, warm, almost alive. But his eyes told him one thing while his instruments told him another. This is impossible. He muttered. One of his junior scientists, a young Veloth with curious eyes, spoke up. Sir, perhaps we should ask the humans how it works. They clearly understand the technology. Thrin turned on her with anger in his voice. We do not ask. We study, we discover. The Dominion has never needed to beg lesser species for knowledge, and we will not start now. But privately, in the depths of his mind, Thrin was afraid, because his instruments were telling him that the ship existed in 11 dimensions simultaneously, that parts of it were folded through space in ways that should tear reality apart, that whoever had built this technology understood the universe at a level the Concord could not even imagine, and the humans, the young, foolish, primitive humans, had somehow learned to use it. High Ambassador Threx received the preliminary reports in his private quarters and destroyed the datapad against the wall in rage. The humans had found something that made all of the Dominion's weapons look like toys, something that threatened the entire balance of power in the galaxy. He opened a secure channel to his government's military council. The human fleet must be seized, he said. Their technology must be studied and replicated. We cannot allow them to possess weapons this powerful. The council agreed unanimously. Within hours, a covert team was assembled. Elite Dominion soldiers, trained for impossible missions. They would board one of the human ships, take what they needed, and disappear before anyone knew what had happened. The operation began at midnight, station time. 20 Dominion soldiers in stealth armor approached the ESS Wanderer, the smallest ship in the return fleet. They had disabled the station's internal sensors. No one would know they were there. The airlock opened easily. Too easily, one of the soldiers thought. But orders were orders. They stepped through the airlock and found themselves standing in the same corridor. They had just left. The station corridor. Behind them, the airlock showed the empty docking port where the Wanderer should have been. The ship was gone. Not fled, gone. As if it had never existed, they tried again and again. Each time, they walked through the airlock and emerged somewhere else. Once they found themselves in a forest that could not exist inside a space station. Once they stepped into a vast white void that stretched forever in all directions. Once they saw stars being born and dying in seconds, galaxies spinning like pinwheels around them. By the 5th attempt, 3 soldiers had refused to continue. By the 10th, the mission was abandoned. The Wanderer sat peacefully in its dock, exactly where it had always been. Its hull shimmered slightly in the station lights, and if anyone had been watching closely, they might have seen something like amusement in the way the light played across its surface. Admiral Chen was granted another meeting with Captain Tanaka the following day. This time, Tanaka had requested the meeting herself. She had something to show. They met in a private conference room, away from the cameras and guards. Tanaka had somehow arranged this, and Chen did not ask how. "The Dominion tried to board one of our ships last night," Tanaka said calmly. "They failed, but they will try again. And eventually, they will try something more direct. Violence, threats, war, if necessary." Chen nodded. "I have been warning my government about this. The Dominion has always feared any technology they cannot control. They should fear this technology," Tanaka agreed. "Not because it is dangerous, but because it represents everything they do not understand. The elder species were not warriors, Admiral. They were builders, teachers. They created this technology to protect life, not to destroy it." She reached into her pocket and removed a small crystal, no larger than a coin. It glowed with the same golden light that powered the return ships. "This is a memory crystal," Tanaka explained. "It contains a fraction of what the elders taught us: history, science, philosophy. They wanted us to understand before we used their tools. Understand what?" Tanaka set the crystal on the table between them. "The elders were the first intelligent species in this galaxy. They rose billions of years ago, when the stars were young. They spread across every corner of existence. They built wonders that we cannot imagine. And then they discovered something terrible." Chen leaned forward. "The silence." "Yes." Tanaka's voice was heavy with sorrow. "The silence is not a species or a weapon. It is a function of the universe itself. Think of it as an immune system. When life grows too loud, when civilizations expand too fast, when they make too much noise in the fabric of reality, the silence wakes up. And it cleans, erases, removes, returns everything to quiet." Tanaka looked down at her hands. "The elder species had billions of years to try to stop it. They built weapons that could shatter stars. They created shields that could protect entire galaxies. Nothing worked. The silence is not something that can be defeated. It is a law of nature, like gravity or entropy." Chen felt the blood drain from her face. "Then what did they do?" "They found another way. They learned to change themselves, to become something the silence could not recognize. They transcended physical form entirely, became part of the universe itself." Tanaka smiled sadly. "They are still out there, in a way, watching, waiting, hoping that younger species will find better answers than they did. And the technology on your ships, it is their gift to us. Tools they developed over billions of years. Shields that make ships invisible to the silence. Weapons that can wound its manifestations. Defenses that can buy time." Tanaka picked up the crystal again. "But these are only delays. The elders could not defeat the silence. They only postponed it." Chen sat back in her chair, trying to process what she had heard. "Why are you telling me this? Why not announce it to the council?" "Because the council will not believe us. They will see only the technology, the power, and they will fight over it. The Dominion will try to claim it. Other species will form alliances against them. War will break out, and in the chaos, no one will prepare for what is actually coming. What do you need from me?" Tanaka leaned forward, her eyes intense. "I need you to help me reach people who will listen. Leaders who care more about survival than power. Scientists who want understanding more than weapons. The good ones, Admiral. Every species has them. We need to find them before the silence arrives." Chen thought about this for a long moment. Her entire career had been spent working within the system, following the rules, respecting the chain of command. What Tanaka was asking would mean going against the council, against her own government, perhaps, but then she thought about her grandmother's face, about the fear in Tanaka's eyes when she spoke of the silence, about what would happen to Earth, to everyone, if this threat was real. "How long do we have?" Tanaka's expression grew dark. Not long. We detected signs that the silence is already stirring. Systems going dark at the edge of known space. No distress calls, no debris. Just silence, as if summoned by her words. Chen's communicator buzzed with an emergency alert. She opened it and read the message 3 times before she could accept what it said. Contact had been lost with 17 systems in the outer rim. All attempts at communication had failed. Long-range scans showed that the stars were still there, but everything else, stations, ships, planets with billions of inhabitants, had vanished. The silence had awakened, and it was coming closer. It went as well as it could, Tanaka replied. But it is only the beginning. Training pilots, modifying ships, building a unified command structure, all of this takes time. And the silence is. The Thresh homeworld burned. Not with fire, the silence did not use fire. But something was being torn from the planet. Something essential. The sky had turned black, not with clouds, but with absence. The great cities that had stood for 10,000 years flickered like dying candles. Admiral Chen stood on the bridge of the ESS Horizon, watching through the viewport as her grandmother's ship led the counterattack. Behind her, 11 other vessels of the returned fleet spread into formation. Around them flew 300 ships from 18 species. The first wave of the unified galactic fleet, hastily modified with elder shielding and weapons. Manifestations detected. The sensor officer reported 17 shapes emerging from the dark zone. They are heading for the population centers. Captain Tanaka's voice came through the fleet-wide channel. All ships engage defensive pattern. Remember your training. The elder weapons will hurt them, but only if you believe they will. Focus your will. Fight with purpose, not fear. The first manifestation appeared directly ahead of the horizon. It was a thing of impossible geometry, angles that should not exist. Surfaces that seemed to fold through dimensions the human mind could not process. Looking at it too long made Chen's eyes water and her thoughts scramble. The horizon fired. Golden light erupted from the ship's modified weapons array. It struck the manifestation, and the thing screamed not with sound, but with a vibration that every being in the fleet felt in their bones. The shape flickered, shuddered, and retreated back into the darkness, target damaged. The weapons officer reported, his voice shaking. It is pulling back. Across the battle space, other ships engaged other manifestations. Some succeeded in driving the shapes away. Others were not so fortunate. Chen watched a Velith cruiser flicker and vanish as a manifestation passed through it. A Dominion destroyer tried to ram one of the shapes and simply ceased to exist. But they were making progress. For the first time in the history of the galaxy, the silence was being wounded. The manifestations could be hurt. They could be pushed back. All fleet units, maintain formation, Tanaka ordered. We need to establish a defensive perimeter around the planet. Buy time for evacuation. On the surface of the Thresh homeworld, billions of beings were trying to flee. Transport ships launched by the thousands, racing for the safety of the fleet's protective barrier. Many made it. Some did not. The manifestations were learning, adapting, finding new ways to reach their prey. High Ambassador Threx had refused to evacuate. He stood in his command bunker beneath the capital city, coordinating the defense of his people. His military had failed against the silence, but the humans and their strange technology were succeeding. He watched the battle through holographic displays and felt something he had not experienced in decades. Hope. His communication officer approached. Ambassador, the human admiral is requesting to speak with you. Threx hesitated. He had spent years dismissing humans as inferior, primitive, unworthy of respect. Now they were the only thing standing between his species and extinction. Put her through. Admiral Chen's face appeared on his screen. Ambassador, we are holding the line, but we cannot do this forever. The manifestations are increasing in number. You need to evacuate. I will not abandon my world. Your world is already lost, but your people do not have to be. Chen's voice was firm but not unkind. Every transport that reaches the fleet is a victory. Every life saved is a defeat for the silence. Please, Ambassador, lead your people to safety. Let us protect them. Threx looked at the displays. More manifestations were emerging from the darkness. The fleet was holding, but for how long? He thought of his children, already aboard evacuation ships. His grandchildren, who had never known a galaxy without the Concorde's peace. Very well, he said quietly. I will order full evacuation. But Admiral, yes? Thank you. For coming. For fighting. You did not have to help us. Chen smiled slightly. Yes, we did. That is what the elders taught us. We survive together, or we fall alone. The evacuation took 6 hours. 6 hours of constant battle, of ships flickering in and out of existence, of heroes dying to buy time for strangers. When the last transport cleared the defensive perimeter, the Thresh home world was empty of intelligent life. The manifestations consumed it anyway. The planet simply stopped existing, not destroyed, but unmade. As if it had never been there at all. The fleet jumped to safety, carrying 3 billion Thresh refugees and a terrible lesson. The silence could be slowed, but it could not be stopped. Earth's government met in emergency session in the deep bunker beneath Geneva. Representatives from every nation, every faction, every political party sat together in a room that had been built to survive nuclear war. They were about to discover that nuclear war would have been a kindness compared to what was coming. Admiral Chen addressed them via holographic projection, her face tired but determined. The Thresh homeworld is gone, but we saved most of the population. The elder technology works. We proved that today. We can fight this. At what cost? The Chinese delegate demanded. We lost 40 ships, hundreds of trained pilots, and we only delayed the silence for a few hours. We saved 3 billion lives, Chen replied. That is not nothing. The American delegate spoke up. What happens when the silence reaches Earth? Can we evacuate 8 billion people? No, Chen admitted. We cannot, which is why we need to find another solution. What other solution? You said the elder species could not defeat this thing. They had billions of years and unlimited technology. What can we possibly do that they could not? Chen was quiet for a moment. Then she said, Captain Tanaka believes there may be another way. Something the elders never tried. But it is risky. Explain. The elders tried to hide from the silence, to make themselves invisible. When that failed, they tried to fight. When that failed too, they transcended, changed themselves into something the silence could not recognize. But they never tried to communicate. Murmurs ran through the chamber. The silence is not a mindless force, Chen continued. The elders' records suggest it has some form of intelligence. It makes decisions. It learns. It adapts. What if we could reach that intelligence? What if we could make it understand that life is not a threat to the universe, but a part of it? You want to negotiate with the thing that has destroyed 100 systems? The European delegate sounded incredulous. I want to try something that has never been tried before. The elders left behind a Kia device that might allow communication with the silence. They never used it because they did not believe communication was possible. But humans are different. We have a history of finding common ground with beings completely unlike ourselves. And if communication fails? Chen took a deep breath. Then we fight. We use every ship, every weapon, every trick the elders taught us. We buy time for as many evacuations as possible. And maybe we find a way to survive long enough for the silence to lose interest. The debate lasted for hours. Some wanted to evacuate immediately, load as many humans as possible onto ships, and flee to the far corners of the galaxy. Others wanted to focus entirely on military defense. A few extremists suggested using experimental weapons that might damage the fabric of space itself. In the end, they voted to try communication first. It was a desperate gamble, but humanity had always been good at desperate gambles. The Horizon led the fleet back to the edge of the dark zone 3 days later. The blackness had expanded again, another 20 systems consumed. But the manifestations had pulled back from the Concorde's remaining territory. They were gathering, waiting. Captain Tanaka stood on the bridge beside Admiral Chen. In her hands, she held a small device that looked like a crystal sphere wrapped in golden wire. The key, the elders created this near the end of their time, Tanaka explained. They had given up on defeating the silence, and some of them wondered if they had been wrong to fight at all. They thought maybe if they could just understand what the silence wanted, they might find another way. Why did they not use it? Fear. By the time they finished building it, they were already beginning their transcendence. They did not want to risk drawing the silence's attention during such a vulnerable transition. Tanaka looked down at the key. They left it for whoever came after. With a warning, communication requires openness. The key does not just send messages. It connects minds. Whoever uses it will have to lower all their defenses and allow the silence to see everything they are. Everything? Memories, emotions, intentions. The silence will know if we are lying. It will know if we are afraid. It will see every darkness in our souls, every act of cruelty our species has ever committed. Chen felt cold. And what if it decides we are not worth saving? Tanaka met her eyes. Then it will destroy us, immediately, completely, no chance to fight back, no chance to flee. That is a hell of a risk. Yes, Tanaka handed her the key, which is why you should be the one to use it. Chen stared at the device in her hands. Me? Why? Because I have seen too much. The Elder's memories are in my mind, billions of years of watching civilizations rise and fall. That much despair might poison any communication attempt. Tanaka placed her hand on Chen's shoulder. But you still believe in humanity, in the Concord, in the possibility that things can be better than they are. The silence needs to see that hope if it is going to listen. Chen looked out the V. The Sol system had never seen so many ships. They came from every corner of the galaxy. Concord vessels, refugee fleets, military formations from species that had been enemies for centuries. They gathered around Earth like a shell, a desperate last barrier between humanity's homeworld and the approaching darkness. Admiral Chen stood on the bridge of the horizon. As the dark zone reached the outer edge of the solar system, she could see it through the viewport now, not just on sensors, but with her own eyes. A wall of nothing, swallowing Pluto and its moons, erasing them from existence as if they had never been. 100 manifestations emerged from the blackness, more than had ever been seen in one place. They drifted toward Earth in a vast formation, geometric shapes that hurt to look at, angles that should not exist in any sane universe. All fleet units, hold position, Tanaka ordered through the command channel. Do not engage unless they attack first. Admiral Chen is going to try something. Chen held the Elder Key in her hands. It was glowing now, responding to the presence of the silence. The warmth had become almost hot, and she could feel something stirring inside it, a vast attention turning toward her. I am going to need complete silence on this bridge, she said. No one speak, no one move. I need to concentrate. Her grandmother, Mei Chen, stood beside her. I will be here, she whispered. Whatever happens. Chen nodded, closed her eyes, and activated the key. The universe dissolved. She was floating in an infinite void, surrounded by darkness that went on forever in every direction. But it was not empty darkness. Something was there, something so vast that her mind could barely register it. Like trying to see a mountain by looking at a single grain of sand on its surface. A voice spoke, not with words, but with concepts that formed directly in her mind. You are small. Yes, Chen replied, not with her mouth but with her thoughts. We are small. We are young. We have existed for less than an eye blink compared to you. The presence considered this. Why do you disturb the quiet? Because we want to live. Because we want to grow. Because we believe that consciousness, all consciousness, everywhere has value. You make noise. You spread. You consume. This is the pattern of infection. Chen felt the silence examining her mind. It saw her memories, her childhood, her family, her career. It saw humanity's history, the wars, the cruelty, the countless times they had hurt each other. It saw the nuclear weapons, the environmental destruction, the empires built on slavery and conquest. She did not try to hide any of it. The silence would know if she lied. Yes, she admitted. We have done terrible things. We have hurt each other and ourselves and our world. We are not perfect. We may never be perfect. Then why should you continue? Chen opened herself completely, letting the silence see everything she was. Her love for her daughter, her pride in her grandmother, her hope that each generation might be a little better than the one before. Her belief that even broken things could be mended, that even darkness could give way to light. Because we are trying, she said. Every day, we try to be better. We fail, and we try again. We hurt each other, and then we help each other. We fight, and then we make peace. That is what consciousness is. Not perfection growth. Change, the endless struggle to become more than what we were. The silence was quiet for a long moment. When it spoke again, its voice was different, curious rather than cold. You are not like the others. What others? The species who came before. They built, they expanded, they became loud. But when I came for them, they ran, they hid, they changed themselves into something invisible. They never tried to speak. The elder species, yes, they were afraid. They believed I was mindless, a force of nature to be avoided, not understood. Chen felt something shift in the void around her. The presence was closer now, examining her more carefully. Why are you not afraid? I am terrified, Chen admitted, but I am more afraid of giving up than I am of dying. I am more afraid of letting everyone I love disappear. Without trying everything possible to save them, she thought of the fleet gathered around Earth. Humans, Thresh, Velith, even some Dominion ships, species that had been strangers or enemies, now standing together against the darkness. We came here with weapons, she said. We came ready to fight, but we also came ready to talk, because that is what humanity does. We reach out, we try to understand, even when we are scared, even when we do not know if the other side will listen. The silence processed this. In the void, Chen could see images forming memories that were not her own. Galaxies spinning through time. Civilizations rising and falling. The endless cycle of growth and silence over billions of years. I was created to maintain balance, the silence said. When life grows too loud, too fast, it damages the fabric of reality. I restore the quiet. This is my purpose. What if balance does not have to mean silence? Chen asked, what if life could grow without damaging reality? What if consciousness could learn to exist more carefully, more thoughtfully? That has never happened. That does not mean it cannot happen. Chen gathered her courage and made her argument. The elder species gave us their knowledge. They showed us how to shield ourselves, how to be quiet while still being alive. We can teach the other species. We can help the whole galaxy learn to grow without making so much noise. She paused. Give us a chance. Watch us. If we fail, if we become too loud, too destructive, then do what you must. But let us try. The silence considered this for what felt like an eternity. Chen floated in the void, waiting, hoping, praying to whatever forces might be listening. Finally, the voice spoke again. You asked me to trust you. Yes, the others never asked. They assumed I could not understand, could not change. Were they wrong? Another long pause. I do not know. I have existed since the beginning. I have never questioned my purpose. I have never wondered if there might be another way. Chen felt something like hope stirring in her chest. Then, let us find out together. The void began to change. The darkness lightened, just slightly, and Chen felt the crushing presence around her ease. I will watch, the silence said. I will wait. If your species can teach the others to grow quietly, if consciousness can learn to exist without damaging the fabric of reality, then perhaps balance can be maintained without silence. And if we fail, then I will return, and there will be nitrogen monoxide, more chances. Chen nodded. Fair enough. The void dissolved. She found herself back on the bridge of the horizon, the key cooling in her hands. Her grandmother was holding her, tears streaming down her face. The crew stared at the viewport in amazement. The manifestations had stopped. As they watched, the vast geometric shapes began to drift backward, retreating into the darkness. One by one, they folded into dimensions beyond human perception and vanished. The dark zone itself began to contract. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, the wall of nothing started to pull back from the Sol system. Tanaka's voice came through the fleet channel. All ships, the manifestations are withdrawing. I repeat, the enemy is withdrawing. Hold position and stand by. Chen found her voice. It worked. The silence agreed to give us a chance. The bridge erupted in cheers. Across the fleet, crews who had been preparing to die began to celebrate. The impossible had happened. Humanity had talked its way out of extinction. But Chen did not celebrate. She stood at the viewport, watching the darkness retreat, thinking about the promise she had made. The galaxy had been given a chance. Now they had to prove they deserved it. 1 year later, Admiral Chen stood before the newly formed Galactic Assembly. Representatives from every species in the Concord, and many who had never joined filled the great chamber. The silence had withdrawn to the edge of known space, watching, waiting. "We have been given an opportunity," Chen said. "Not a victory, but a chance to prove that consciousness can grow without destroying itself or its universe. This will require changes, sacrifices. We must learn to expand more carefully, to use resources more wisely, to treat the fabric of reality with respect." She looked around the chamber. Humans sat beside Thresh. Velith worked alongside Dominion engineers. Former enemies had become partners, united by a common purpose. The elder species tried to save themselves by hiding, by changing, by running away from what they were. They survived, but they lost everything that made them alive. Chen shook her head. "We will not make that mistake. We will survive by becoming better, not by becoming invisible. We will prove that life and balance can exist together." The assembly voted unanimously to approve the new protocols. The galaxy would grow slowly, carefully, with humanity serving as teachers and guides, not because humans were superior, but because they had been given the responsibility, because they had been brave enough or foolish enough to talk to the silence, when everyone else had only known how to run. After the session, Tanaka found Chen on the observation deck, looking out at the stars. "You did it," Tanaka said. "You saved everyone." Chen shook her head. "I bought us time. The real work is just beginning. We have to build something that has never existed before, a galactic civilization that can last forever. That is going to take generations, but it is possible now." Tanaka smiled. "That is more than the elders ever achieved." Chen thought about the vanished fleet that had returned carrying impossible technology. She thought about her grandmother, who had crossed 50 years to come home. She thought about the silence,